Love that. So it's not called the didgeridoo. What did you say it's called?
Yeah, so there's a really interesting backstory to this. So this instrument has been used by Aboriginal people for recreation, for ceremony, for sacred purposes for a really, really long time. People don't know how long, but we do know that the culture of many Aboriginal groups is at least 40,000 years old, maybe over 60,000 years old. So for reference, that's 10 or 12 times as far back as the pyramids in Egypt. Incredibly old culture, and the stories of the people and the culture were passed down orally. And this particular instrument has over 20 different names, depending on the region of Australia and the indigenous people, the Aboriginals that are playing it. And this particular one would be known as a yidaki because it's created by nature. It's hollowed out by termites, and this is a eucalyptus tree. So it would have been growing in the ground, and then the harvester, who's a man called Dapa Ganambar, he would be from an area that this would be termed yidaki. So if I was to make one of these out of PVC pipe or bamboo, or even if I was to go to Australia and make one out of eucalyptus, as this one is, it would be known as a didgeridoo. So now, didgeridoo was a name that was never known to this instrument until Europeans started coming to Australia. And it's not really understood why it was called didgeridoo. Some people think it's onomatopoeia, like the sound. People were trying to describe it to people who never heard it. So they would say it's like didgeridoo. And then I've also heard reference that there was maybe an ancient Irish instrument that had a similar name. And so for a time there was influx of Irish. And so, it's one of these things where it's really story, and that holds the secret and the narratives to these particular types of ancient instruments. It's really had a winding path to be here into my hands. And so I'm often quick to point out to people that, this is not a didgeridoo, it's a yidaki, though the common name when you're in the United States, people know it as didgeridoo, even if they even know it. When I first started playing one 30 something years ago, 30 years ago, it was almost no one had seen one of these before. So it's really funny now that it's become in the popular culture some.
They're both such great names. I don't know. Yidaki.
Yeah, totally.
Can you explain a little bit about what you do?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh man. The easy answer is my mission is to share musical instruments and culture to educate and inspire and unite. So I have a business that's called Peace Culture Music, and I travel to different places with a collection of rare musical instruments and artifacts that I've collected for 25 years. And I set up a little museum in a space, in a community space, and then I teach interactive presentations. So I'll demonstrate a rare instrument like a yidaki, and then I'll tell a little bit about the story behind it. And then this instrument actually has an accompanying instrument, which are two sticks. People call them clack sticks. The traditional name, one of them is bilma. So I'll get people to play maybe eight notes, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, something with an accent so that the group gets involved, and then I'll demonstrate the instrument on top of the rhythm behind it. So I might also talk about how to play this instrument requires a certain type of pranayama, a breath technique called circular breath. So you have to breathe in through your nose while you're blowing the air from your cheeks out of your mouth through the pipe to keep it going the whole time. So there are all these stories that are tied, and everything is story for humans to understand, and symbols. So a lot of my fascination is learning about the traditional ways that people carried this knowledge and this wisdom forward into the times that we live in. And I'm fascinated with the metaphor that instruments and sound and culture are medicine. They're forms of medicine that really belong to us all. They're our birthright. And these times that we live in, I think it's so important to recognize that there is all this medicine that's accessible all over the world right now. And my hope is to play a little part in sharing the things that I've sought out and learned, and also the wisdom and teaching that's been invested through me by people that are traditional keepers of these practices and these tools and this knowledge. So it's a little long answer to your question. I love music, and I love people, and I love learning, and I love peace.
Mm. So what's your story for getting involved in this? Like, can you take us back to the entryway, the entry point for you when maybe you were hit with the medicine of music and then took the next steps to devote so much of your time to this?
Sure, man. Sure. Yeah, first of all, thanks for making the time to hang out together this morning. It's an honor to share these things in this very special place. So let's see, what comes up for me when you ask that is that I had a really miserable school experience. I'm dysgraphic, which means that, or I have dysgraphia, which is a form of a learning disability that makes processing from thoughts into writing extremely challenging for me. I don't have as many of the textbook signs of it anymore because I've done a lot of working around it, such as teaching myself or being in typing class as a kid so I can type really fast. Things like my handwriting are still extremely challenging to have thoughts and then to write them clearly, and organize things that are in charts and in graphs. It's very difficult for me. So in school, I was marginalized in that sense that I had to be in special classes, LD classes as they called them, which at that time in the mid-90s, it was really rough, because we quickly, I can only speak for myself. I was put in these spaces with others who were labeled handicapped or, had a disability, disabled, and that's hard for a kid when you get pushed into a space, because a lot of times we become what we're seen as, and our intuitions are so strong. Even though my mom was saying, "Oh, you're brilliant," she would use words like that. "You're very brilliant, and you have all these gifts with people and with story and with creating things and art." But my reality was looking out and seeing, like a lot of violence in these classes, in these spaces, because I was put in with children that had emotional disabilities, disturbances, people that at that time we call them mentally retarded, MR, learning disabled people. And then a lot of the underlying factor of this was there was a lot of, isolation in certain areas of these kids' lives. They had been neglected in certain ways. There was probably a lot of underlying like physical and sexual abuse happening as well, that these children were starting to show these signs of being disturbed in certain ways. And so I think that because I was so interested and curious, and we lived in a place that we had a lot of woods, I was able to start creating my imagination and developing my sense of wonder and curiosity. And it was fed by a lot of love in my family unit. It was always a lot of encouragement for my interest and curiosity. And then at the same time, my grandfather was a musician, and he was really into jazz music, and he was a military guy. He was a veteran, my granddad Jim. So he started seeing these signs that I was restless. I was also labeled ADD, so I had attention issues, still probably do in certain ways, but meditation helps with that, and yoga. So my granddad, he would always encourage me to play patterns and what we call rudimental drumming on snare drum, which is like the kind of drumming that people march to, like drum corps. And so from as long as I can remember, I was always being taught different patterns, right, left, right, left, left, or right, left, right. And then at age 10, because I'm from Williamsburg, Virginia, which is a 18th century living history museum where people there dress up as costumed interpreters. From age 10 to 18, I was in this phenomenal organization called the Colonial Williamsburg Fife and Drum Corps. So I was a little Revolutionary War musician reenactor. So I would march down the street and play drums with this group of 120 boys aged 10 to 18. So at that time, it was the best of times and the worst of times because it was 120 boys and 2 adults. And the older boys would teach the younger boys, and it was the 80s and 90s, so it was very little oversight characterized those periods in time. There wasn't cameras everywhere, or there wasn't cell phones, so we were really brutal to each other in another sense. And I think that that's always played a role in my growing my self-image and self-worth, because we were super critical of each other, very abusive emotionally to each other, because that's what we were taught. We were taught that the only way to make this core organized and structured to the degree that it's like a machine. We were known as the best children's fife and drum corps in the world. I got paid to play drums from the time I was 10. So we took it very seriously, and you're in it. When you commit to fife and drum, you're in it. So it's this closed society in a way, very fraternal. The year after I left, they started admitting girls into the program, so it softened up a lot, and they're as good as they've ever been, if not better. So, without digressing, I think it was the love of music instilled in me by my granddad, and it was the troubling times in school, and then I think it was my love for culture, being raised, fortunately, in a very integrated place. I always had friends that had different colored skin. I grew up in the place where the first enslaved Africans were taken in 1619, was probably 3 miles from my house at Jamestown, and then Jamestown itself was the center of the Powhatan Confederacy. So I always had this vibe, as we say. I always felt like there were angels around me, because I did a lot of stupid, self-destructive things. But I always felt like there was something that was watching over me. And now I understand that as being the spirits of my ancestors and the ancient ones that came before us, and that somehow guide what's going on in certain ways. And that was affirmed to me going to indigenous places, and I've spent pretty substantial time in Africa, West Africa and East Africa and North Africa, and especially in West Africa, I've had people comment that I move very interestingly to them in that space, because though I look like this, they say, you are African, man, you fit in right here, and I've hardly ever felt so free as I do walk in that land of the African, of the black man. There's something very sacred to that land, and I think part of it is that those people were never separated from God. They've always been connected to that space, and I look forward to going to Australia as well to experience some of that energy. And I've had a lot of amazing teachers. I've yearned to experience tutelage. I've been so curious, and I've had a lot of encouragement from people that validated my interests, even through the tribulations of being in spaces where people still have a lot of their own resentments and prejudices to work around, in this world where people are radically racializing more and more, as if it's some crucial component to our existence, is like the color of our skin or the way we talk. So I've had a lot of not a lot. I've had some pushback over the years of being somebody that shares culture, but I think most of those people that are critical, they're not really aware exactly of what I'm actually doing. And I think there's a lot of their own work there rather than what I'm doing, because I've never been excluded by people in an actual authentic culture. It's always people that are, say like in the United States, where there's a lot of confusion here about what is culture and what is identity, and people being protective over these spaces and being guards at the door of different cultural traditions. So yeah, it's something that I'm constantly learning how to navigate this world of having a childlike wonder about just the richness of culture, if you will, music and people and tradition and story. And lastly, what I'll say is now my work is that I get to travel around with this museum of cool things, and I get to share with groups, usually from 20 or 30 people. Maybe that's in a yoga studio or doing sound journeys with my teacher, Tracy Sahaja. Shout out to her. She's a veteran of this space, Satchidananda. And I do drum and rhythm gatherings around the world with different rhythms from different traditional cultures. And I do that with veterans groups or retirement communities or children. Most of what I do, though, is really large gatherings of young people in schools. I'll teach 200 in a big group, or I'll do 4 groups of 200 all during the day, almost 1,000 children I'll see all during a day, and I'll do my interactive presentations with maybe 15 or 20 instruments, and I like to say it's kind of like a fireworks show where it's just non-stop engagement. I'll show this instrument, then I'll show this rhythm and get the kids to clap along, or I'll show the West African drum and I'll have this side play this rhythm and this side play this polyrhythmic clap. So and then I'll tell the story behind it, and maybe I'll highlight a friend of mine that I met on the journey that embraced me and taught me this rhythm, or this fun little fact I found out, like the yidaki is the only non-medical intervention for sleep apnea. Doctors prescribe this instrument and learning how to circular breathe to strengthen the muscles around the nose and the face. So there's all these little ditties that I find so engaging, and that's what I light up with, as you can see. So, long answer to your question. Thank you.
How do you feel when you're in front of a large group, 200 people or so, and it's on you to guide this experience that so many people are having? Like, yeah.
That's something that is a real alchemy, a magical thing, because I think because I'm so uniquely organized at this point for that experience, it's having the command of the command is not the right word, a fluency with these instruments is one thing. So I'm 44, so I've been playing drums professionally or formally, you could say, for 34 years. So I don't like to use the word mastery of anything, because the more that I learn about things, the more I realize I don't know. So when I'm playing drums, for instance, I know it so well. I know it like a language. So when I'm teaching a large group, I'm not speaking in really technical, highly intellectual academic terms. I'm speaking very simple, metaphorically. So I'm teaching this group to be like ABC, and this group to be like EFG. And so to me, I know it in and out so much, and I share these things with thousands of people every year. So at this point, I've gotten very fluent in how it works with large crowds. And so there's always outlying things, there might be, I remember one time, I'm aware of your question. I'll give you a funny story about outlier type things. So 98% of the time, if it's a group of adults and I'm doing a keynote speech that's interactive, I'll be doing something like that tomorrow, Friday night, day after tomorrow, up in Leesburg, Virginia, for a Association of Public Montessori School Teachers. Maybe 120 people will be in the audience, 120, 180. And so I have to read the dynamic of the crowd and see, well, are these people going to be, some of them standing there like, it's sort of an after party type thing. So it's like, well, this certain thing might not work if half these people have drinks in their hand and there's not some place to put the drink. I'm not gonna sandbag all the other people so that it makes it all awkward. It's like things where there are these different components. It's reading the crowd, and then one of the things that comes up with children is that, I might work in a school that has the beautiful policies of integrating children who would be considered special needs. So there might be some children that have certain emotional or intellectual challenges to where they might just have verbal outbursts, or their body might start shaking when I'm in the middle of showing a crystal singing bowl. So it's like the ability to transition where it's embracing the uniqueness of that child and using it as an opportunity for everybody to see that, because they're looking at me for validation to normalize the situation. Even though it's an abnormal situation, in a larger context, it's a normal way of being with humans. A lot of times, in this culture, we marginalize those people so they're not integrated into the society. So I love that nowadays people are being more, as someone that was marginalized in my learning experiences, when things like that happen, that's when I really see a somewhat of a miracle happening, because I'm being used. First of all, I'm being puppeteered by the marionette master. I mean, that's the first thing, is the more that I do these things, I know that to be true. I've woken up to that intermittently, and when I'm on stage sharing with lots of people, that's when I'm most present, because it's working through me. I don't have enough time. Daniel is too much for Daniel usually. And yet when I am being acted through to deliver what's coming through, then I become fortified as the vessel to share these things. And I'll tell you a interesting story that I got to experience myself working. Was there were all these children. It was a sea of children, and I was demonstrating what's known as kalimba or mbira. It's a thumb piano. Many people are maybe familiar with a thumb piano, and I found that most people are not familiar that it actually comes from two different areas in Africa. One about, they think like 600 to 800 years old. And then another place they were making them with reeds and different kinds of wood. And so they're maybe over 1,000 years old. So in southern Africa, the area we now call Zimbabwe, there are people called the Shona people. So there's over 2,000 languages spoken in the continent of Africa. And before Europeans came, these weren't countries; they were kingdoms of different regions. There's over 7,000 languages spoken in the world, I tell people, and each of those languages has a culture with stories and cosmologies behind it. So the people who made this certain kind of thumb piano that's generally known now as kalimba, they're the Shona people. And for the Shona people, the thumb piano, the sound of it is a sacred sound that's used to connect with ancestors that have passed away before us. So it's like a cell phone for connecting with the ancestors. And I love that little tidbit about it because it really, as a human that feels, it makes so much sense that would be the sacred use of it. And it's used recreationally, and It's used for gathering and fun and ceremony. And I will demonstrate that instrument, and I'll talk about different aspects of the kalimba, like the different resonators that make the sound expand, and I'll talk about the technique to playing it. So one of the ways that I keep the children engaged is I say, can you pretend that you're using your thumbs to play the kalimba? And so this has been probably 6-7 years ago, so I wasn't as versed as I am now at guiding large groups. So things like this that come up now, I'm able to flow with a little better. But I remember this was a monumental one. I'm sitting there and I say, the kids are all quiet. They're enraptured with the interaction, and they're so ready to hear the sound because I've hyped it all up. I say, can you pretend that you're playing a kalimba with your thumbs? And I hear a little voice say, Mr. Daniel, I don't have any thumbs. And I'm thinking, who is this little troublemaker back here? Because I think it's some kid messing around. And I look, and it's this sweet little boy, and he holds up his hands, and he has a deformity from birth. He doesn't have any thumbs. He just has hands with no thumbs. And my stomach dropped inside of me because all the little children are looking at me, and he's their pal, he's one of the gang. So the message I'm getting, in real time is like, man, like, what are you going to say to this kid? How are you going to neutralize this? And so I watch myself say, just without skipping a beat, I said, oh, that's okay, buddy. We don't even need to use the thumbs. We call it thumb piano, but you can totally just do it by plucking with your fingers, If you ever tried to play a piano? So all the kids start doing it with their fingers like this, and I feel this sense of relief, because even as children, they're so highly sensitive to each other and to differences, but they haven't had anybody judge the differences yet, per se. Is like they only pick up what we as adults or authority model for them. So I don't think I would have had the capacity, I would have overthought that. If somebody had given me that situation before, I would have been like, okay, well, I guess this is what I do, and this is what I do, and, oh, geez, and then after we might have to have a sensitivity talk, and, I'm not really necessarily like that, but when I project how systems work these days, there's a lot of that overthinking and analyzing to make people feel more included, when in the moment, the Spirit moved through me to make really light out of it and make it, hey, no worries, man. You don't have thumbs? Whatever, dude. Let's do it with our fingers. And it was like the collective sense of relief that everybody felt by it not being a thing, because obviously those kids knew he didn't have thumbs, and it makes me sad to think a couple years older, and he probably would get mocked and ostracized by some children because of that. But they were still at an age, they probably 5, 6 maybe. So it just became something where, for lack of a better way of putting it, the Spirit moves through us all. And I love things that allow me to be encapsulated with these things that I'm so intimately connected with, because it's not only is it fulfilling, it serves a purpose and a function for others. I think a lot about, and I tell children all the time, I've got a few main tenets that I drop on them, and I say, more and more in this world that I grew up in the West, the message that we get is like, gimme that. What can I get? And to me, that's never been fulfilling. In spiritual circles and in recovery groups, they say, it's the God-sized hole, or the hole in the soul that's unfillable. And the only thing I've found to find that fulfillment is, what is the gift that I can give to the world? What is the giant package of gift that I can give to bring joy to the world? And then I say, have you enjoyed this time that we've shared together? And generally, fairly universally, it's yeah, because these instruments do the work for me in a lot of ways. I've gotten very fluent at presenting them, But this is the magic and the value of these things. And I also ask people, another one I ask older kids is, how much is music worth to you? And they look at me and then I say, so for instance, if I gave you $1 million today to never listen to music again for the rest of your life, you can't hear music anymore. And so to see their brains flip, and a lot of them, of course, they compulsively say, shoot, give me $1 million. But then other ones, it stops them because it's one of those things like love. What is it actually worth to you? What is it worth when it's not there? What is the space that holds? And because it's not transactional in our world, and because it's, you can't really put a price on it, though people try to, vibration and instruments, it's hard for us to quantify that because we've been raised in this place that's disconnected in the true value of things, perhaps.
It's fascinating to consider this question of the value of music, really. And I wonder about moderation in this regard for different things in life. Like sometimes things that are really good, the automatic response is just gives me as much of it as possible. But maybe that's not so wise. I had this thought, it's kind of ridiculous some time ago, but it was around animals, is that even my daughter recently, as a school trip, we took her to the zoo and she got to see all these different animals and she's been exposed to animals. I mean, once you have a kid, you realize the connection between child and animals, just animals.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's too much, like if it would be wiser to, as children grow, to expose them to and then there's this thing called leopard, and then there's this thing called penguin, kind of build it one at a time. And I wonder about this in regard to music. If we're just born and we're inundated with so much music, and also so many different instruments at one time. And what I think you're doing maybe is giving the gift of isolating sound more, medicine, as you called it. Anything to say about this? Is this and the importance of kind of listening to one instrument at a time and appreciating that particular unique sound?
That's deep, man. What comes up as you say that is, that's funny. It's kind of weaning children into animal exposure. I think, with instruments and with life, it's all vibration. I remember somebody turning me on to how lasers are concentrated light, and light is waves of energy. So a laser can be used to cut somebody open and do a surgery. And then when we go back in many forms, it's the same vibration inherently that sound is. And so I think that when we use instruments in a conscious way and music in a conscious way is different than using it in an unconscious way. And what I mean by that is a lot of these things are right on the cusp of allopathic Western medicine and Eastern medicine, naturopathy. And we get into an odd gray area because we live in a culture as well where many people don't have a means of being validated in some way. And so everything is kind of for the taking. So if something like sound is really appealing and it's innately powerful because it can connect and it can reach, there are people that will say, oh, I can I'm a sound healer. Like if you come to me, I'll heal you. I can play these bowls and I can sing these ancient verses that I learned in my sound healing tribe online, and it will heal your cousin of cancer. I don't know about all that, but I do know that traditionally music has had the capacity to put people in states where they have had experiences of being healed from dis-ease. And it seems to me that from my own experience, when I'm under a great deal of stress, I have physical manifestations of that stress through illness. And then on the other hand, for instance, when I come to Yogaville for a week, or when I was in the Light program many moons ago now, as things started to settle, even better example, when I did the Vipassana, the 10-day meditation, which I had just been in Rio de Janeiro living for 3 months, and then I came back to the US, and 2 days later I went to Vipassana, which is like 10 days of meditation for 10 hours a day. And I was in my late 20s. I didn't know what I was getting into. I just thought it sounded cool. So when I went there, and the vibrations that had been accumulating and shaking through me for my whole lifetime, arguably way farther back even, all these things started to settle like ripples on the water. And in that state, I was able to have a completely different experience and interaction with the world that I was experiencing. So where I'm going with this is that I believe that instruments have the ability to create those vibrations, and then the space between those vibrations, all ancient music and music in general, rhythmically, it has just as much unique space between the sound. And when rhythm happens, there are all these phenomenons, like entrainment is one of them. Like I've experienced this so many times, I don't even remember anymore. I can give 20 people drums to play, and we can start playing doom, 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 and everybody starts playing together on the same note. Or the same phenomenon happens when children swing on swings, or adults. We start becoming entrained in that swinging. Or when women stay together in one place, I've heard that their menstrual cycle starts syncing up. This is entrainment. So there are these things that are happening that are way beyond our conscious will, that are ingrained in us, that are right on the cusp of what science is proving and what ancient people have always known. And what I was digressing about in that middle is that it's really hard in the noise and confusion of this culture, where traditionally this wisdom was passed on by lineages of people that oftentimes worked in secret, and they worked in isolation so that they were able to keep that grounded seclusion from noise that might be, I say noise, vibrations that might be incongruent to the harmony that was required for them to transfer these ancient things. For instance, the yidaki that I have here, there are certain cultures in Australia that this instrument is only sanctioned to be played by men who are Aboriginal. And there were times that, in my understanding, that people that heard this instrument that were not of that secret society of men would be killed for even hearing this instrument. So it played a sacred place. I have a water whistle from Peru that was used apparently shamanically, so that if someone heard it and they were sick, it would have the ability to clear out any kind of negative vibrations, if you will, and create a state for that person to be healed. So that's, that's what comes up for me as you mention the different sounds. To me, things can create and they can destroy. And our words and our intentions have the ability to allow us to expand or contract. And everybody's experienced, most people have experienced, just like a dog in a room can sense when something's not right to somebody. Anybody spend a lot of time around animals, they've seen that they can sense vibes. And I think that when we do, that's what I meant by doing things with intention. I don't know that in a lot of ways it can be scientifically validated at this point in time, but I tell kids, when you listen to music that talks about things like, I love you, or man, you're really beautiful, or you're doing really awesome, keep doing it, I got your back, then I say it's very different than listening to something. And I always be careful, I never say this to them. I'll say, if something is, if this is you, and then somebody says, hey, I hate you, you look terrible in those shoes and those clothes. We feel that as humans. I don't know that that can be registered on any kind of machine, the vibes of that. But if somebody's continually hearing messages that are degrading and they're negative, that affects people. And people that already have trauma are often attracted to that type of energy. Just as when people are in a state of balance and peace and upliftment, people can be attracted to that. And my thought is that, well, more and more, I have become conscious to discipline myself that when I play this instrument, I think things like the former, like, hey, I really hope that what I'm sharing with you and my words today helps anybody that's curious about the direction to go in their life. Or I'm sending out a lot of love. I mean, that's the simplest one, is just imagining love and light, a type of, loving kindness, meditation, if you will. These things are ways of choosing to be that people have considered and practiced for as long as time, and it can get swallowed up by the noise of conflicting vibrations, but inherently instruments are playing different ranges of vibrations. And just as one person likes a certain kind of song or a certain type of food, it may be repulsive to another person. Sometimes when I share certain instruments, people are really uncomfortable, say around, a lot of times people do these gong baths nowadays, which is really beautiful. And for a lot of people, the gong is hitting a very low chakra. And that's where a lot of trauma is stored for people. So somebody that's just taken a weekend course on being a sound healer, bless their heart, and they're probably doing something to add to somebody's journey. But it's also playing with fire in a way, because if somebody's not, that's why a lot of these traditions were kept through lineages of people. Same with yoga and pranayama. You don't want a child operating on somebody doing heart surgery. And that can be a child, physically or spiritually. When we open these things up, it could be very dangerous, and it can turn somebody away from the path of what they're looking for in this lifetime if it's not given properly. So, long answer to your question to say that I think that instruments are one of the most beautiful gifts that God has given us, and to come at them with an intention of humbleness and with compassion. And again, one of my hopes is with what I do, the educational part, is to dignify and humanize the people that created and kept these traditions. I've never claimed to be anything that I'm not in regards to these things. I'm not an indigenous Aboriginal person. I'm not a African person, and yet in a way we're all these things. This is, I'll say one last thing, I've got over 200 instruments from 6 continents, and I've been to 24 countries, some of them many times, mostly in what we would call the developing world, and some Native American reservations. And all that are experiences that I was blessed with to be able to share and fortify this collection of rare things that I believe is everybody's collection. If somebody comes in a room and says, who owns these? I say me. But the truth is that I'm the one that gets to take care of these things. I'm the one that gets to protect these right now because I'm a link in an infinite chain. And one day, if I do my job right, God willing, somebody else will take my place in sharing the wisdom of what these things hold. So that's what I think.
You mentioned like instruments are one of the greatest gifts from God.
Yeah.
Right? And I wonder, it almost seems like yes, and are instruments also one of the greatest gifts that we've given to ourselves? Right? Because it takes a certain amount of creativity to carve out a eucalyptus tree or whatever it is to think, what is going to happen when I do this, right? So I wonder if instruments are also maybe like at the pinnacle, in a way, of human creativity.
Oh, certainly, bro. They're if you look at it that way, they're an expression of the human, just as flowers are to plants or leaves are to a tree. There are flowers. There are representation of our human expression in that way. And one of the things I'm fascinated with is the prehistorical roots of some types of instruments. For instance, this is, as I think I mentioned, this instrument is fascinating because it was hollowed out. It's a tree that was hollowed out by termites, by little ants. So the only human intervention on this instrument was cutting the top and the bottom off and then painting it. So humans created that sound somehow organically. They figured out that could make that sound by buzzing one's lips. Well, there's a small handful of a fistful of instruments. There's the voice, there's the drums, and there's the flute or whistle, and then there is the what could be known as bull roar. Are you familiar with that? A foil. It's I almost brought that. It's a string that's connected to a piece of wood or a piece of bone or a piece of stone that's shaped like a small fan blade. And then it's spun. It's spun here, and then it's swung around by a person, and it goes woo 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 woo. And so that instrument, or again, it's not only an instrument because in many cultures it's a sacred sound tool, and it was found in 6 different continents. The oldest one was radiocarbon dated, I think, to over 23,000 years old. And it was found in a cave. It was made out of animal bone, and it was found in a cave in Ukraine. Now, that instrument also was used in ancient Greece and Dionysian festivals. Then it was used by Aboriginal Australian people for communication over long distances. It was also used in secret ceremonies, again, where anybody that was not sanctioned or initiated into that secret ceremony could be killed for hearing that sound. It was used by children that were going west with their family across the plains in the 1800s to spook each other, to make it sound like it was a ghost in the woods. It was used in many, many African indigenous societies. And that's just to name a few. Polynesian society and New Zealand have a version of it. So every culture in the world, cultures in every continent of the world have had these sound-making tools. And just as you said, I mean, they're an expression of us. And when it gets to that space where it goes so far back and they're found in all these different places, it's like they blossomed like flowers. Or they pollinated, and there were people that were going around way, way before we know. I'm a little bit of an armchair anthropologist in the sense that I'm fascinated with human migration. And so there are many elements of instruments that have traveled around. For instance, the ubiquitous handpan that people know as Hong instrument that looks like a spaceship. Those were found for the first time around 2001. Some people in Switzerland made one. Well, they had based that on the steel pans from Trinidad and Tobago, which were X-guarded steel drums that people would carry things in over ships, and then they'd throw them away. Well, the people that would make those were the descendants of enslaved people from West Africa, and those people were geniuses and experts at instrument making in their own right. And they had the history of course, they were brought over with nothing material, but they had the wisdom of the ancients in them and these instrument making techniques. And for instance, they would take tuned bamboo pieces. So say you had like a 8-inch long bamboo piece and then a 10-inch long and a 12-inch long. And when you hit them on the ground, they make different pitches. So they would pitch them perfectly, and then they would use those they learned how to pitch the steel pans by banging them with a metal hammer that was softened on the top so it didn't dent it too hard, and they would make the perfect pitches tuned off of these bamboo shoots. So I consider I tell children when I explain that digression that this handpan that we know is this beautiful, magical, trippy instrument in the U.S. now that you go to festivals and see everywhere, or all over the world now, it's somewhat of an Afro-Caribbean, European instrument. So in just my lifetime, it was first found around mid-1950s was when they were first finding these steel drums made in the Caribbean. So just in 50 years, 60 years, we've seen this migration of this instrument through human ingenuity and culture, cultural dispersion or alchemy, if you will. So it's all about perspective, and everything is story. It's like what we believe to be is what we become and how we see the world.
You mentioned childlike wonder.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the common experience that people have is losing that, right? Like when we're children, we all have this wonder and just curiosity about, well, what is this and what is that? And I got the sense that maintaining that is extremely important to you, almost in a way like safeguarding your wonder. I'm wondering, especially in regard to different instruments, right? Because you've learned how to play so many different instruments, and there has to be that deep curiosity there of like, whoa, like how many times have you experienced like, whoa, this is something new that I'm learning about for the first time. How does it work? What's the story behind it? All of that,
Yeah.
And do you feel like any pressure ever, like I guess what prevents us from having this wonder and curiosity, and how can we maintain it as an outlook, as a way of life?
Great question. You made me think of that phrase, love is a verb, and in that sense, life is a verb, and I think one of the things that I learned experientially going to West Africa was that I was way too stuck up here. And drumming in Africa made me have to come down into my heart. And I think that that's an element of really a certain type of toxicity in this Western culture where we've been barraged our whole lives. Anybody under 50 has been raised on marketing campaigns to manipulate us to buy, to be consumers. And I I think that for me, I was really fortunate that I learned a degree of discipline at an early age. And I think that having accountability structures is something that's very rare in this culture, because generally people, I don't think, like responsibility unless they're modeled that. Like being on a farm, you have to do all the farm chores and things. People from my generation, and I think I judge younger than me, and my judgment is that literally, using the literal term of spoiled, we're spoiled because we haven't had to experience, and this is a generalized statement. There are many people that have experienced varying degrees of trauma, but compared to when I've traveled to the developing world, where when I'm in Ghana, there's no running water, there's no toilets, there's really no sanitation. So it's a different degree of, abject poverty there. Here we have a different kind of spiritual poverty, But when I look at my life, I think up until like 10 years ago, I started having some massive changes with my relationship with instruments, because I had gotten to a sort of critical mass maybe where I had a certain fluency with the yadaki, with djembe drums, and with drum kit. So I had played with certain bands, and I had started to get validation in myself, because the evidence was mounting that, wow, I can have an interactive relationship with others with these. And what that really is a metaphor for I am able to give of this. And regardless of the external validation, I am having a reciprocal experience with my relationship with this tool. And so once that started to occur, then something clicked in me, I think, where it was like, okay, so I feel fulfilled when I'm able to share these things. So how am I going to set that up? Because I knew that, on the ego level, again, I'm a product of this culture. I grew up in the same soil. I was an early wanter to be an influencer. And part of that too was certain traumas that I had as a child, not only with school, but certain types of abuse where it really isolated me in my heart. So I always used to crave to have validation externally from others. I wanted people to like me, think I was special. I wanted people to want me around because I have felt so marginalized and pushed away. Little things like being a little pale redheaded kid with freckles. When I went to Catholic school for a couple years, and my little group of friends, they had a sleepover and I was not invited. Something as seemingly little as that, where it hurt so much, and yet it was such a gift, because out of that that wound, I found the ointment through these tools. And to come back to your question, I think that the most important things that I do to keep that up are I create accountability, and I belong to an organization called Whatever It Takes, which is an online accountability group where we come up with three different objectives. Like one of mine, for instance, is I do yoga, I do asana 4 times a week minimum, 45 minutes. And that way I know I'm doing that. I've been doing that for 4 years. I do it more than that a lot, but I never do it less than that. And I have a group of people that I check in with every week that I'm going to do that. I journal 3 times a week, 10 minutes minimum. I do it more than that sometimes, but I always do it minimum that. And then I'd write this book I've been working on. I've been working on 2 different books. And one is kind of the things we're talking about, using instruments and culture for teachers and for educators to create more cohesion. So having the accountability and having the discipline, and then again looking at the world as what can I give rather than what can I get out of it, because that's the formula. Is that part of the problem with what's happening now in the West is we don't have a lineage of tutelage to anything. There are people involved in religious groups and ideologies, but it's very different than having something that is secular, like community, where when I go to West Africa, people just dance and drum in the evenings and everybody comes and expresses themselves. People aren't drinking and getting high. They're just coming together and enjoying being with the kids and the old people and singing the traditional songs. Since we don't necessarily have that, people seek validation through Facebook posts or going to the club or, you name it. So to find things that we're able to give in a way, I think, hacks that, because it's creating the opportunity to have the fulfillment through our reciprocity of giving, but it's doing it in a way that is not saccharine. It's not like, we're not giving and losing, we're getting, because that's our nature is to be abundant and to be fulfilled. And full of life, and with no strings attached. We don't need to pay for that. We're not supposed to. And so to create something like an ashram in ourself and where we go, that's the objective. But there's not a humanual yet that gives us these instructions on how to live like this. So ideally, I think it's to find our tribe and be the best friend, work on being the friend that we want to attract, the partner we want to attract. And then it will attract more of that to us. And if that's truly what we want, then it starts to again have this kind of critical mass where these things are attracted to us, and then we're allowed to be vulnerable because we're fortified in ourself enough that we can experience that childlike wonder. Because even masters that I've had, my master in Brazil of capoeira, Klaus Janor, who is the Grand Master of Shakochi Jikoro, which we didn't even get into capoeira, but if people don't know it, check that out. He's probably mid-70s now, and I tell people he is like a real master, because he is of a lineage of descended of African people. So he's a deep, dark-skinned man, and yet we call him the master. And I'm the only non-Brazilian in this group. Our group goes back 8 generations to an enslaved person. So this is this tough guy that's a legit fighter, and yet he could hold a little baby and be just jolly and silly, and he clowns around and he's the best joker. And yet, if anybody came in the room trying to harm any of us, he'd be the first one up to take that person out. He's the balance. And by having that space and that confidence in oneself, we're able to be vulnerable. And so that's my hope for people, is that, we embrace that light that we have innately, and we also embrace that shadow that is there to teach us, that fear is good. We have to be so careful. We have to protect women and children and the vulnerable, and the stranger, and these little simple things that sound cliche in a way, they're things that they're our birthright and they're our choice, and each of us gets a choice to do that. It's hard in the world. There's a lot of noise and disharmony, but I think by making little steps towards one's own personal practice and discipline, like diet and movement and talking, connecting with others, finding people that will listen. There's a lot of help available, These are things that we have to treat ourselves like a child a lot of times, because it's hard out there. Life's always been hard. It's particularly hard right now in the world. So that was a long diatribe on that. But that's what comes up for me when you say that. Thank you for.
I love this. I think of it as like building a foundation that once stable or more and more stable and secure, then I'm not dysregulated as easily.
Yeah.
And that allows for that exploration.
Exactly, man.
Which is so important.
Exactly, man.
Yeah.
You're exactly right, bro.
I know you have an upcoming program
Yeah.
at here at Yogaville.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about this program and what you hope to do?
Yeah, sure, man. So it'll be a little bit of a mix-up, mix-up's maybe not the right word, mix-up, we use that in like reggae music, kind of a mix of a lot of different vibes. So I wanted people to have the experience. Last time I came and did a program, it was in the lotus, in the belly of it, in the inside, and it was more of a passive kind of extended shavasana. I call them like a sacred sound journey, where I did a whole presentation of these rare instruments that are used in sacred purposes traditionally in different cultures. So I did segues between them and continuously played sound the whole time, and people seemed to really enjoy that. There was a lot of beautiful relaxation, and at the same time, I have this gift of sharing drumming in ways that make it accessible and fun and inclusive for beginners all the way to advanced stages of playing rhythm. And one of the ways I do that is I take traditional rhythms from different areas in the world that I've studied, and I make them, I take the complexity out of the foundation of playing them together. So we'll take however many participants, say we'll have 20. I have djembe style drums, West African djembe drums, and we'll each have a drum, and then we'll start with this foundational aspect of this traditional rhythm. And then as we play it and we get in the groove together, I'll give cues of how to kind of jazz it up more and add more into that rhythm. So it gives people an opportunity to experience rhythm making as a group. So it's a way to non-verbally communicate with each other. I always work on making it 100,000% fun and also challenging, so that everybody can experience what it feels like to be a child learning something new again. And that's something that's so special for me, is that when we tiptoe our little toe into the water of learning new things, it can be really scary at first. And then the other side of that fear is that it invigorates us and makes us feel alive. So the workshop is going to be, I think 3 days. I got to check it out. I'll have been traveling from now until then, which is kind of wild. For the next 3 months, I'll be on the road going west and then to Hawaii, and then I'll come back and I'll be right back here in Yogaville when I get back. So I'm really excited, God willing, get there and back protected. And so it'll be an exploration of some rare sacred instruments, some of which people can check out and hold. It'd be probably 15 instruments. I'd say most people have seen only half of them before in person. And so I'll get to tell a little bit about the stories of them, and then we'll do a lot of interactive drumming as well. And there will be time for if people want to connect and you have a follow-up question about this or that. That's what I'm here for. It's my passion and my love, and it's an honor to be here. I wish there were more places like Yogaville where people could come and get away, and also come to have that space to really find that harmony within themselves and connect with some other people on the like path. So excited to see you then. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
One more question I wanted to ask.
Sure.
You've emphasized the importance for you on giving, like focusing on not necessarily what can I take or what do I want to get, but the act of giving.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you feel that has connected you more with your purpose, instead shifting and looking at it like like that? Like what can I give to others if that feels like it's connected you with your purpose?
That's a good question, man. For sure, it goes hand in hand. You know, it's a catalyst to more fulfillment of that. And you make me realize something that I'll give a little offering on that, is that I ask groups sometimes, or I instruct them. I say, if you were me up here, looking out at all of you, imagine that you were the person that was standing up here. Say that at the last minute I got into traffic and I couldn't be here, and they need somebody to stand up for an hour and keep everybody's attention with something cool that they would be into. What would you give if that was you? And so depending on the age, you know, I know that a lot of them, their world is not any bigger than, 20 feet around the school, if they're really young. And as we get older, our perspective gets larger and larger. So I say, well, look at this. So if nothing comes to you right now, in 5 years, if you could do anything you wanted, what would it be that you do, that you stand up in front of this group and share with everybody? What could you invest in so much that you get as excited as I do about all these things? So it gives them those opportunities to say, like, what am I into? And I always use examples looking out at the crowd. I'll see, a little girl with really cool braids. So I'll say it might be hair braiding. I'll see a kid that's got some shirt with a reference to something Minecraft or something that I have no idea about. And I'll say it might be computer game designs. And I'll see a few of them go, yeah, or it might be basketball, or if I'm in a country area, it might be farming, And so I try to hit them with a few different things that are, or sports, So it's like, well, you can take that and then you can get so excited about it and know it in and out, and I say to them, music and instruments, these are my thing that I'm interested in. You might not be interested in all in this stuff, but it's the same formula. What can you find that gets you excited? And I really believe that everybody has something. Some people are not even safe enough in their self to acknowledge what it is that they want so much. And that's where those of us who do have something get the unique gift of holding the space that they can feel safe and vulnerable enough that they can even let that pass through their mind as a little seed, because it might be years before they build the foundation that they can start expressing the want to move towards that. So it's a constant evolution, man. And I wonder, it's like I've found something that I'm so grateful for each day, because I used to live in a shell. I for all intents and purposes, felt like I was in an emotional cage for a lot of my life, and now I feel like somebody that got out of prison that is free and had $1 million in a Ferrari. I mean, just metaphorically, just like, like just woo, like I'm the richest guy I know. I tell kids that all the time. I'm the richest guy I know. They're like, how much money you got? I'm like, that's not what I mean. I used to say, look at my car, because I had an old car, but now I pay payments on my van. But it's like, I'm the richest guy I know because I get to do what I love and I get to bring joy to others sometimes. And it's like, it's not that difficult, There's so much noise out there, so much disharmony, but inside, like we know this life is way more than the media would tell you, than the narratives out there would tell you that are trying to sell you something. It's like, we got it, man.
The truth is that this experience is a gift.
Yeah, it's a miracle, man.
That's the truth.
It's a miracle, So that's a little bit of what I think, man. I'm so grateful for you making this time to hang out, and I'm excited to know you, man, and continue our friendship, dude.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. If someone is interested in checking out your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, thanks, man. So I have a pretty cool website. It's peaceculturemusic.com. I also have a YouTube channel that is the same one, Peace Culture Music, or you can search my name, Daniel Scruggs. And then if you're ever in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I'm there at the same time, I have a a studio there, it's a museum. That's where I keep all the artifacts and instruments. And if we can arrange it, I give private tours of that. I'll travel anywhere. I've traveled sharing my programs, all kinds of cool places, and really into helping other people to, kind of navigate the world of finding instruments and finding one that resonates with you. And I say, if I don't know the answer, one of my teachers probably does. And if you think I'm cool, wait till you see my teachers, because all these things, they're tools, and I've been doing it so long that just like a magician, it makes it look easy, but really all it is like it's like learning a language or learning to write. You put enough time into something, and then it becomes you, and you become it. And yeah.
I'm really opening up to realizing that practice is pretty much the answer for
That's it, bro.
Almost anything. It's just simple. It's like
just showing
practice.
up, dude.
Yeah.
Showing up, man. Like you spend an hour every few days doing something, man. Over time, the relationship with everything. If I start, it's just like a language. If I start Spanish right now, which it's on my mind because that's what I'm working on, in a year I'll have one relationship with it. I'll be like, wow, I'm so much farther than a year ago. Or I might judge it as, gosh, I'm not getting much better. But then in 3 years, I'll look back and see how much farther in 10 years. So my relationship with drumming was, after 10 years, oh man, I thought I was awesome. I went to college. My college professor was like, whoa, you're like really good at this one element of drumming. But the other elements, I was like a baby at, like reading music, all this stuff. And then 10 more years, and I was like, man, I'm not really as good as I thought. All these people around me can play this and that so much better. And then 10 more years, after 30 years, it was like, okay, like I'm pretty fluent at this, but then it started dawning on me like, whoa, like Indian music, whoa, I can't even grasp it. African music, whoa, I can just begin to,
right.
So, yeah.
But often, we say like, oh, I'm not good at that, right? But the truth is that we're not even qualified to make that statement because we haven't put the time in.
Well,
like when you put the
man.
hundreds of hours in, and you still think that you're not good at it, okay, then you could say that.
And good is so relevant, man, because
right.
it's like, it's the person having the most fun at the end of the day, and it's the ability, I tell people sometimes, a lot of times they see videos of what I do, and sometimes people make sideways comments that sort of seem like, I could do that. Like, I could totally do that. Like, your life is so cool. You got very lucky. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I've been working at it obsessively for a really long time. And only in the past 5 years have I been able to do it full time and have a business where I'm not bankrupt like every year, just a little bit, making enough money that I can make payments on a van, And a lot of that is like, it's the parts that people don't see that are the glue that binds it, It's like doing something so much, it gets to the point where one is, it becomes part of you, It's not like an accessory, it becomes us, And then when it's looked at like that, then it's like, nothing else really it matters, It's like parachute jumping. That you can study it all day and you can be all knowledgeable about it, but unless you jumped out of a plane with a parachute, you really don't know, And I think that doing things like that, practicing, next thing we know is it becomes us. Something shifts, and those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. And here I am saying, because I don't know. So yeah, man, that's all I know, bro. This has been really cool, man.
Yeah. Would you mind closing us out? With
bless us out with it. Yeah. So. Yeah, grateful for this time, grateful for my teachers, my family and friends. Here we go, sending us off with some love vibes with the sacred Yadaki of the Aboriginal people. Peace, brother.
Awesome.
Howdy on.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this content and think others might as well, please feel free to share and subscribe.